Veltar Mekonis had been drawing maps of the galaxy for 40 years. His 6 eyes could spot mistakes that other cartographers missed, and his tentacles moved across the holographic displays with the precision of a master artist. Every star system, every trade route, every safe passage through dangerous space, Veltar knew them all by heart. But today, something bothered him. Something that had been bothering him for weeks now. He floated in his workspace high above the crystal towers of Zentara Prime, surrounded by the soft blue glow of star charts that filled the air around him. The Galactic Mapping Consortium had trusted him with their most important work for decades. He had mapped the dangerous void zones where ships disappeared. He had charted the paths through the crystal nebula that could tear apart a starship's hull. He had even mapped the territories of the warlike hegemony during their expansion period. But there was one area of space that remained blank on every official map. Zone 7 Alpha, they called it. A big empty space on the outer rim of the galaxy where nothing was supposed to exist. Veltar had always assumed it was just unexplored territory. The galaxy was vast, after all. There were thousands of systems that had never been visited by civilized species. But today, while updating the navigation charts for the merchant fleet routes, he noticed something odd. The blank space was too perfect, too round, too deliberately empty. He expanded the holographic display, zooming in on the region. The boundary line around Zone 7 Alpha was clean and precise, like someone had drawn it with a ruler. Real unexplored space didn't have boundaries like that. Real unexplored space had rough edges where scout ships had made partial surveys before, turning back. This looked like someone had decided that this part of the galaxy simply didn't exist. Senior Cartographer Mekonis? The voice came from behind him, young and curious. Veltar turned to see Zefara Quill, the new junior mapping specialist who had joined the consortium only 6 months ago. Her silver skin gleamed under the workspace. Lights and her large eyes held the eager expression of someone still excited about her job. Yes, Specialist Quill, what do you need? I was working on the update for the commercial shipping routes and I noticed something strange. She gestured toward the display. There's this big empty area on all the charts, Zone 7 Alpha, but when I checked the survey records, I can't find any reports explaining why it's marked as restricted. Veltar felt a chill run through his body. In 40 years of mapping, he had never questioned Zone 7 Alpha. It was just there, empty and unmarked, like a hole in the galaxy itself. Have you asked the archive section about it? He said carefully. I tried. They told me the files are classified at level Omega. They said I don't have clearance to see them. Zefara's voice carried the frustration of a young worker who had run into bureaucracy for the first time. But how can empty space be classified if there's nothing there? What's the secret? Veltar's tentacles twitched nervously. Level Omega classification was the highest security level in the consortium. In 40 years, he had never encountered a level Omega file. Most military secrets were only level Delta or Echo. Perhaps you should focus on your assigned work, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. The commercial shipping routes are important. The consortium depends on accurate navigation data for trade. But even as he said it, Veltar found himself staring at the empty space. Zefara was right. How could empty space be classified? After the young specialist left, Veltar sat alone with the star charts floating around him. The blank area seemed to mock him, daring him to investigate. He had spent his entire career mapping the unknown, but here was a mystery right in his own workplace that he had never noticed. He pulled up his personal access codes and began searching through the historical archives. Surely there had to be some record of why Zone 7 Alpha was restricted. Even if the current files were classified, there might be older records from before the restriction was put in place. It took him 3 hours of searching, but finally he found something. A file dated 212 years ago, marked with the old classification system. The file had been downgraded to public access decades ago, probably by accident. The title made his blood run cold. Initial Contact Report, Species Designation, Human. Veltar opened the file with trembling tentacles. The report was written by Commander Thex Valdris of the Galactic Survey Fleet. It described first contact with a species that had developed faster than light travel independently, somewhere in the outer rim territories. The coordinates listed in the report fell directly within Zone 7 Alpha humans. The blank space on the galactic maps was human territory. But why was it classified? The report described the humans as technologically advanced but peaceful. They had agreed to diplomatic contact and seemed interested in joining the galactic community. The initial surveys showed a thriving civilization with dozens of colonized worlds. Veltar searched for more files about humans but found almost nothing. A few scattered references in old diplomatic records, all heavily redacted. A mention in a military report about the Kepler incident, but the details were blacked out. Everything about these humans seemed to have been systematically removed from official records. He was so absorbed in his research that he didn't notice the soft chime of his communication system until it had repeated several times. Senior Cartographer Mekonis, please report to Director Vorthak's office immediately. Veltar's heart sank. Director Kaelsin Vorthak was the head of the consortium, a stern Valdorian who had run the organization with iron discipline for 20 years. Veltar had only met him in person 3 times, all during formal ceremonies. The director's office was at the top of the consortium tower, with windows that looked out over the entire city. Vorthak sat behind his massive desk, his forearms folded across his chest. His face was unreadable, but Veltar could sense the tension in the room. Sit down, Mekonis. The director's voice was quiet, which somehow made it more frightening than if he had been shouting. Veltar settled into the chair across from the desk. His tentacles curled nervously around his body. I understand you've been accessing historical files today. Files about Zone 7 Alpha. Yes, sir. I was curious about why the region is marked as restricted when it appears to be empty space. And what did you find in these files? Veltar hesitated. Something in the director's tone warned him to be careful. I found an old contact report. It mentioned a species called humans who live in that region. Director Vorthak was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was even softer than before. Mekonis, in your 40 years with the consortium, have you ever wondered why we have level Omega classification? I assumed it was for military secrets, sir. No, level Omega is not for military secrets. Level Omega is for information that could endanger the entire galactic community simply by being known. The director leaned forward. Zone 7 Alpha is not empty, Mekonis. It is deliberately excluded from our maps for the safety of every species in this galaxy. But sir, if there are humans living there, why can't we include them in the galactic community? The old report said they were peaceful. That was 200 years ago, Mekonis. Things change. Species evolve. Some evolve in ways that make peaceful coexistence impossible. The director stood up and walked to the window looking out over the city. Effective immediately, you and Specialist Quill are being transferred to the Deep Space Survey Division. You will be mapping the Andromeda approach, far from the core worlds. Your work here is finished. Sir, I don't understand. We haven't done anything wrong. No, you haven't. But you've started asking questions that have no safe answers. Vorthak turned back to face him. The transfer is not a punishment, Mekonis. It's protection. For you, for Specialist Quill, and for everyone else who might be tempted to go looking for answers that should stay hidden. Veltar left the director's office with his head spinning. Transfer to the Deep Space Survey Division meant exile to the furthest edge of known space, mapping empty systems that no one would ever visit. It was where the consortium sent cartographers who had become inconvenient. But as he walked through the corridors of the tower, one thought kept repeating in his mind. If humans were so dangerous, why had they stayed in their own territory for 200 years? Why hadn't they expanded into the galaxy like every other spacefaring species? That night, alone in his apartment, Veltar found a message waiting on his personal communication device. There was no signature, no identification code. Just a simple line of text. Stop looking for the humans. Some boundaries exist for everyone's protection. The message deleted itself after he read it, leaving no trace that it had ever existed. But Veltar stared at the blank screen for a long time, wondering who had sent it and how they knew what. He had been researching. Outside his window, the lights of Zentara Prime sparkled like stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of known space, Humans were living their lives in the blank area on the galactic maps. And apparently, the entire galactic community was terrified of them finding out. 3 weeks after his transfer to the Deep Space Survey Division, Veltar found himself sitting in the darkest corner of Murphy's bar on Nick's station. The station was a rough place on the edge of civilized space, where smugglers, mercenaries, and other questionable characters gathered to drink and make deals that governments preferred not to know about. Veltar had never been to a place like this before. The air smelled of alien alcohol and unwashed bodies. The lighting was dim, and the music was too loud. But it was also the kind of place where a person could ask dangerous questions without attracting official attention. He had spent the past 3 weeks using his mapping skills for a different purpose. Instead of charting star systems, he had been tracking down people who might know something about humans. Old military records had given him names, and those names had led him to other names, until finally he had found someone willing to talk. Captain Rex Morden sat across from him, nursing a glass of something that glowed blue in the dim light. The old soldier looked tired, with scars across his face and hands that spoke of a lifetime of violence. His military uniform was faded and patched, and his eyes held the distant look of someone who had seen too much. "You're either very brave or very stupid," Morden said, his voice rough from years of shouting orders over the noise of battle. "Asking questions about humans is a good way to disappear." "I need to know," Veltar replied. "I've been mapping the galaxy for 40 years and I never knew there was an entire civilization that we're not allowed to acknowledge." "Why?" Morden took a long drink and stared into the glass. "I was there during first contact. Served on the HSS Vengeance under Admiral Crix. We thought it would be routine, another primitive species to bring into the galactic community. We were wrong." The old captain's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Veltar had to lean forward to hear him, over the noise of the bar. The humans had just developed their own version of faster-than-light travel. Crude stuff, we thought. Their ships were smaller than our fighters, and they only had colonies on maybe 30 worlds. The Hegemony Council decided to make contact and offer them protection in exchange for tribute like we did with everyone else. What happened? First contact went fine. The humans were polite, curious, eager to learn about the galaxy. They invited our diplomats to visit their worlds, showed us their cities, their technology. Primitive but impressive for such a young species. Admiral Crix was pleased. He thought they would make good subjects. Morden paused, his eyes focused on something far away. Then came the Kepler incident. Veltar waited, afraid to interrupt. The Hegemony decided to establish a research station in the Kepler system. It was technically in human space, but we figured they wouldn't mind. After all, we were the advanced civilization. We had the right to go where we wanted. Morden's voice turned bitter. We were used to species being grateful for our attention. But the humans objected. Oh, they were very polite about it. Sent a diplomatic message asking us to leave. Said they appreciated our interest but preferred to keep their territory sovereign. Admiral Crix laughed it off. What could they do? They had 30 worlds and tiny ships. We had the largest fleet in the galaxy. Morden finished his drink and signaled for another. His hands were shaking slightly. 3 days later, the research station simply vanished. Not destroyed. Vanished. One moment it was there on our sensors, the next moment it was gone. No debris, no energy signature, no trace that it had ever existed, along with the 1,000 soldiers and scientists who were on it. Veltar felt his blood growing cold. What do you mean vanished? I mean it stopped existing. The humans sent another polite message, apologizing for the inconvenience, and again asking us to leave their territory. They offered to return our people, unharmed if we agreed to respect their borders. And did you? Morden's laugh was harsh and bitter. Admiral Crix was furious. No primitive species had ever defied the hegemony like that. He ordered the entire Third Fleet to the Kepler system. 50 battleships, 200 cruisers, 1,000 fighters. The most powerful military force ever assembled. The old soldier's voice dropped even lower. I was on the bridge of the Vengeance when we dropped out of hyperspace. The human fleet was waiting for us. Maybe 20 ships, tiny things that looked like toys compared to our battleships. Admiral Crix ordered them. To surrender. What did they do? They said no. Morden's eyes were wide, as if he was still shocked by the memory. Just no. No threats, no demands, no negotiations. Just a simple refusal to be conquered by the most powerful military in the galaxy. Veltar realized he was holding his breath. Admiral Crix gave the order to attack. Every ship in the fleet opened fire at once, enough firepower to destroy a planet. Morden was quiet for a long moment. The humans didn't fire back. They didn't need to. What happened? Half our fleet simply stopped working. Not damaged, not destroyed, they just became powerless. Dead in space. The other half found that their weapons wouldn't fire. Every system was intact, but nothing functioned. We sat there helpless while those tiny human ships moved between us like we were standing still. Morden's second drink arrived, and he drained half of it in one gulp. Then they did something I still have nightmares about. They made 12 of our battleships disappear. Not destroyed, they just ceased to exist. 12 ships with 50,000 crew members each, gone in an instant. No explosion, no debris, just empty space where they used to be. How is that possible? I don't know. Nobody knows. Our scientists studied the sensor records for years afterward, but they couldn't explain it. The humans had technology that could make matter stop existing. Veltar's mind was reeling. What happened to the fleet? The humans sent us a message. They said they were sorry for the inconvenience, but they had asked us politely to leave twice. They hoped this demonstration would convince us to respect their wishes. They offered to return all our people and ships if we agreed to avoid human space in the future. And you agreed? What choice did we have? Admiral Crix was a proud man, but he wasn't stupid. We limped home with half our fleet missing and the other half utterly helpless. The Hegemony Council classified the entire incident at the highest possible level. As far as official records are concerned, the Third Fleet was lost in a hyperspace accident. Morden finished his drink and started on his third. That was 200 years ago. Since then, no government has attempted direct contact with humans. The few times exploration ships have accidentally entered human space, they've been politely escorted out and asked not to return. But surely someone must have tried to study them from a distance. Oh, many have tried. The Consortium, the Trade Guild, even the Zephyrian Empire have sent long-range reconnaissance missions to human space. None of them ever came back. Never? Well, that's not entirely true. Morden's voice took on an even more disturbing tone. Sometimes the ships come back, but the crews are different. Different how? They don't remember anything about their mission. They think they've been mapping empty space. Their logs show routine surveys of uninhabited systems. But when intelligence officers examine them closely, they find evidence that the ships have been somewhere else entirely. Advanced technology that wasn't there before. Knowledge that the crews shouldn't possess. It's like the humans let them look around, then carefully edited their memories to remove anything dangerous. Veltar felt sick. The humans are that advanced? The humans are beyond our understanding, Morden said flatly. In 200 years, every species in the galaxy has made some technological progress. Better ships, stronger weapons, faster communication. But we're still using the same basic principles. The humans seem to have moved beyond our physics entirely. How do you know? Because I've spent the last 20 years collecting information about them, and what I've learned scares me more than anything I faced in the war. Morden leaned forward, his eyes intense. Do you know what long-range sensors detect when they scan human space? Veltar shook his head. Energy signatures that shouldn't exist. Structures the size of moons that appear and disappear. Entire star systems that seem to be under construction. And ships, thousands of them, that move faster than our sensors can track. The old soldier stood up, leaving payment for his drinks on the table. The humans aren't hiding from us because they're afraid, Mokonis. They're hiding from us because they don't want us to know how far behind we've fallen. The blank space on your maps isn't there to protect them. It's there to protect us from the truth. As Morden turned to leave, Veltar called after him. What truth? The old captain looked back with eyes full of fear and sadness. That we were never the masters of this galaxy. We just thought we were, because the real masters were kind enough to let us play at being important. After Morden left, Veltar sat, alone in the noisy bar, staring at his untouched drink. Everything he had believed about the galaxy was wrong. Humans weren't a primitive species to be protected or conquered. They were something far more advanced than any other civilization, and they had been watching silently while everyone else struggled with technologies they had mastered centuries ago. But if humans were so advanced, why did they stay hidden? What were they building in their isolated territory? And most frightening of all, Commander Zara Vex stood in the observation deck of Border Station Omega, staring out at the endless stars. The station looked like any other patrol base from the outside, a collection of metal modules connected by corridors, with sensor arrays and communication dishes pointing in all directions. But Station Omega had a secret purpose that only a handful of people in the galaxy knew about. They were watching human space. For 15 years, Zara had commanded this hidden outpost. Her official mission was to monitor shipping traffic along the Outer Rim trade routes. Her real mission was to keep an eye on the most dangerous neighbors the galaxy had ever known, neighbors who most people didn't even know existed. The work was boring most of the time. Humans kept to themselves, rarely venturing beyond the invisible boundary that marked their territory. Occasionally, a human ship would appear at the edge of sensor range, but they always stayed on their side of the line. It was like living next to a sleeping giant who was polite enough to stay in his own yard. But lately, the giant had been moving in his sleep. "Commander, you need to see this." Lieutenant Chris Thorne's voice came through the intercom, tense with worry. Zara made her way to the sensor control room, where Thorne was hunched over a display screen filled with scrolling data. The young officer had been monitoring human communications for 3 years, and his equipment could pick up signals from deep inside human territory. "What do you have, Lieutenant?" "Energy readings, ma'am. Much higher than anything we've detected before." Thorne highlighted several sections of the data stream. "These signatures are coming from systems all throughout human space. Whatever they're building, it's happening everywhere at once." Dr. Hayes Brennan looked up from his own workstation. The xenobiology expert had been studying human activity patterns for almost as long as Zara had been commanding the station. His job was to analyze any information they could gather about human behavior and technology. "The construction appears to be massive in scale," Brennan said, adjusting his thick glasses. "These energy readings suggest projects the size of small moons. And the power requirements?" He shook his head. "They're using more energy in a single day than most civilizations use in a year." Zara felt a familiar chill. Every few months, their long-range sensors would detect something that reminded her just how far beyond galactic understanding the humans had advanced. But this was different. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was preparation for something big. "Any idea what they're building?" "None whatsoever," Brennan admitted. "The energy patterns don't match anything in our databases. It's like they're using principles of physics that we haven't discovered yet." Lieutenant Thorne suddenly straightened in his chair. "Commander, I'm picking up a transmission. It's not on any of the usual human frequencies." "Let me hear it." The voice that came through the speakers was calm and pleasant, speaking in perfect galactic standard. But what it said made everyone in the room freeze. "Border Station Omega, this is Jake Morrison of the Human Diplomatic Corps. We would like to request a formal communication session at your earliest convenience." The room fell silent. In 15 years of monitoring human space, they had never received a direct communication from humans. The standing orders were clear. If humans ever attempted contact, Zara was to immediately notify Galactic Command and await instructions. But the transmission continued before she could respond. "We understand this may come as a surprise. Please don't be concerned about security protocols. We've been aware of your monitoring station since it was established, and we appreciate the professional manner in which you've conducted your observations." Zara's blood ran cold. The humans knew about the station. They had always known. "We've allowed your surveillance to continue because it seemed to provide comfort to the galactic authorities. However, circumstances have changed and we feel it's time for a more direct dialogue." Thorne was frantically working his controls, trying to trace the source of the transmission. His face was pale with shock. "Commander, this signal isn't coming from human space. It's coming from right here in our local system." "That's impossible," Brennan whispered. "Our sensors would have detected any ship approaching the station." The pleasant voice continued, apparently hearing their conversation. "Please don't be alarmed by our proximity. We've taken care to avoid causing any disruption to your operations. If you're willing to communicate, please respond on this frequency." Zara stared at the communication console, her mind racing. Every protocol she had been taught said she should refuse to communicate and immediately contact higher authorities. But something about the situation felt different. The humans weren't threatening or demanding. They were asking politely, just like they had politely asked the hegemony to leave their territory 2 centuries ago. She activated the transmitter. "This is Commander Vex of Border Station Omega. We acknowledge your communication." "Thank you, Commander Vex. My name is Jake Morrison, and I serve as a diplomatic liaison for human-galactic relations. Would it be acceptable if I appeared via holographic projection? I think this conversation would be more productive if we could see each other." Before Zara could respond, the air in the center of the room began to shimmer. Light coalesced into the shape of a human male, wearing what appeared to be a simple uniform. He looked ordinary. Average height, brown hair, friendly eyes. If she had met him in a spaceport, she would have assumed he was just another trader or tourist. But this ordinary-looking human represented the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with me," Morrison said, his voice warm and conversational. "I want to assure you that this communication is not being recorded by your superiors. We've temporarily isolated your station's communication systems to allow for a private discussion." Thorne frantically checked his equipment. "He's right, Commander. All our external communications are offline, but I can't find any sign of interference. It's like our systems are choosing not to connect to the galactic network." Morrison smiled. "We try to avoid causing unnecessary technical difficulties. Commander Vex, I understand you've been monitoring our space for 15 years. Have you found the work interesting?" The question was so casual, so conversational, that Zara found herself answering honestly. "It's been educational. We've learned that you prefer to keep to yourselves." "Indeed we do. Privacy is very important to us. But we've also been watching you, Commander. You and your team have conducted your surveillance with remarkable professionalism. No attempts to penetrate our territory, no aggressive actions, no reckless behavior. We appreciate that." Dr. Brennan stepped forward nervously. "Mr. Morrison, if I may ask, how long have you known about our station?" "Since before it was built, Dr. Brennan. We were aware of the galactic government's decision to establish monitoring posts along our border. We could have prevented it, but we understood the psychological need for your leaders to feel they were keeping an eye on us." The implications hit Zara like a physical blow. "You've been allowing us to watch you." Of course, it seemed harmless, and it helped maintain stability in galactic politics. Your governments feel more secure believing they have intelligence about us, even if that intelligence is limited. Lieutenant Thorne found his voice. "But why are you contacting us now? What's changed?" Morrison's expression became more serious. "We're entering what you might call Phase 2 of our development. The projects you've been detecting are part of our preparation for a more active role in galactic affairs." "What kind of role?" Zara asked, though she was afraid of the answer. "For the past 2 centuries we've been content to observe and learn while the galactic community developed naturally. It's been a fascinating study in sociology and political evolution, but we've detected certain external threats that require a more direct response." Brennan leaned forward eagerly. "External threats? From outside the galaxy?" "Among other things, yes. There are entities beyond your current sphere of awareness that have been probing galactic defenses for decades. Until now, we've been able to manage these threats discreetly, but the situation is becoming more complex." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humans hadn't just been isolating themselves. They had been protecting the entire galaxy from threats that no one else even knew existed. Morrison continued in his calm, pleasant voice. We've decided it's time to establish more formal relations with the galactic community. But first, we need to make some changes to the current monitoring arrangements. What kind of changes? Zara asked. We'll need all surveillance stations along our border to be withdrawn. Not because we object to being watched, but because we're about to begin operations that might be disturbing to outside observers. Disturbing. How? Morrison's smile was gentle but somehow terrifying. We'll be restructuring several star systems to better serve our needs. The process involves manipulating matter and energy on a scale that might cause panic if observed by those unfamiliar with our capabilities. Thorne's voice was barely a whisper. You're going to restructure star systems? Among other things. We'll also be relocating some of our facilities to positions that provide better strategic coverage of the galaxy. Chancellor Mordak Zelen had called emergency sessions of the Galactic Council before, but never one like this. Representatives from 47 different species filled the Great Assembly Hall on Galactic Prime, their voices creating a nervous buzz that echoed off the crystal walls. Some had traveled for days to attend this meeting, abandoning important business on their home worlds. The reason for their urgency floated in the center of the hall, a three-dimensional holographic display showing human ships, hundreds of them, hanging in space above every major capital world in the galaxy. They had appeared simultaneously, without warning, 12 hours ago. No sensor had detected their approach. No communication system had picked up their signals. They had simply materialized in orbit, as if they had been there all along and someone had just turned off their cloaking devices. Order! Order! Chancellor Zelen's voice boomed through the hall speakers. The aged Zentaurian's normally calm demeanor was cracked with worry. In his 50 years leading the Galactic Council, he had never faced a crisis like this. Fellow representatives, Zelen began, we are here to address the unprecedented appearance of human vessels above our home worlds. As you all know, contact with humans has been restricted for over 2 centuries. Their sudden presence represents either an act of war or an attempt at communication. Representative Kexara of the hegemony stood up, her warrior's pride evident in every movement. Chancellor, these humans have violated our sovereignty. Their ships hang above our capitals like swords ready to fall. This is clearly an act of aggression. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Many species had built their reputations on military strength, and the appearance of foreign warships above their worlds was an insult that demanded response. What response do you suggest, Representative Kexara? Asked Dr. Yilman of the consortium. Our intelligence reports indicate that human technology far exceeds our own. Any military action could result in disaster. We cannot show weakness. Kexara's voice was fierce. If we allow this intimidation to succeed, what prevents them from making further demands? Chancellor Zelen was about to respond when every screen in the assembly hall suddenly activated. The image that appeared made the entire hall fall silent. A human woman in a dark blue uniform stood behind a curved desk, with what appeared to be a command center visible behind her. Her expression was calm and professional, but her eyes held an authority that made seasoned politicians uncomfortable. Good day, representatives of the Galactic Council. I am Admiral Nina Torres of the Human Space Navy. I apologize for the dramatic nature of our appearance, but circumstances require immediate communication. The hall erupted in shocked voices. No one had authorized this transmission. The Council's security system should have prevented any unauthorized signals from reaching the assembly. Admiral Torres continued speaking as if she couldn't hear the commotion. I understand this situation may seem alarming. Please be assured that our ships pose no threat to your worlds. We are here to initiate formal diplomatic contact after 2 centuries of voluntary isolation. Chancellor Zelen found his voice. Admiral Torres, by what authority do you interrupt this session? Your ships are in violation of galactic sovereignty laws. Torres smiled, and something about the expression was deeply unsettling. Chancellor Zelen, we appreciate your concerns about sovereignty. However, given recent developments, we felt it necessary to address some misunderstandings about the nature of galactic politics. Before anyone could respond, another human appeared on the screens. This man wore a simple civilian outfit and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in the room. My name is Ambassador Peter Kane. I serve as Chief Diplomatic Officer for Human Galactic Relations. With your permission, I would like to present some information that may clarify our position. Representative Kexara stood again, her voice angry. We did not give permission for this intrusion. Remove your ships immediately or face the consequences. Kane's expression didn't change, but the screens around the hall began displaying new images. Star charts, sensor readings, tactical displays, information that should have been classified at the highest levels of galactic security. Representative Kexara, I understand your frustration. However, before we discuss consequences, I think you should be aware of some facts that your governments have chosen not to share with you. The first image showed a tactical display of hegemony military positions throughout their territory. But, overlaid on the display were red markers indicating human installations. There were hundreds of them, scattered throughout what everyone had believed was purely hegemony space. For the past 2 centuries, we have maintained monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Not for purposes of espionage, but for protection, you see? While you have been focused on your local politics and territorial disputes, we have been dealing with threats that your species are not yet equipped to handle. The display changed to show long-range sensor readings from beyond the galactic rim. Massive energy signatures moved in the darkness between galaxies, vast and alien. The Devourers, Kane said simply. Entities from outside our galaxy that consume entire civilizations. They have been probing galactic defenses for decades, testing our weaknesses. Every few years, they send scout forces to evaluate our readiness. Dr. Yilmon leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overcoming his shock. What kind of entities? How large are these forces? Individual devourer organisms are typically the size of small moons. Their scout fleets number in the thousands. Full invasion force would be composed of millions of such entities, capable of consuming entire star systems. The hall fell silent as the implications sank in. Chancellor Zellen's voice was barely a whisper. How have we never detected these threats? Because we have been intercepting and neutralizing them before they could reach the galactic core, Admiral Torres replied. Every Devourer probe, every scout expedition, every advance force has been eliminated by human forces operating beyond your sensor range. Kane activated another display, this one showing human military installations scattered throughout empty space beyond the galaxy's edge. Massive structures that dwarfed the largest galactic battleships, armed with weapons that defied understanding. We have been your guardians for 2 centuries, fighting a war that you never knew existed. But the situation has changed. The Devourers have begun sending larger forces, and we can no longer handle the threat discreetly. Representative Vorthak of the Trade Federation found his voice. Why didn't you tell us? Why fight alone? Because 2 centuries ago you weren't ready, Kane replied honestly. Your species were still engaged in territorial wars, still focused on primitive concerns about resources and territory. Involving you in a galactic defense effort would have caused more problems than it solved. And now? Chancellor Zellen asked. Now, circumstances require a more coordinated response. The next Devourer probe will be larger than anything we've faced before. We will need to use weapons and defenses that will be visible throughout the galaxy. There is no way to hide our true capabilities any longer. Kane activated a final display that made several representatives gasp. It showed human installations not just at the galactic rim, but scattered throughout known space. On worlds that were supposedly uninhabited, in star systems that were marked as empty on all official charts. In the deep space between civilizations, we have been everywhere, watching and protecting, while allowing you to believe you were independent. But independence was always an illusion. Every species in this galaxy exists because we have chosen to let you exist. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. The most powerful politicians in the galaxy sat in stunned silence, realizing that everything they had believed about their place in the universe was wrong. Representative Kexara's voice was small and defeated. What do you want from us? Cooperation, Admiral Torres replied. The age of isolation is ending. We can no longer protect you without your knowledge and participation. The threats we face require a unified galactic response. Kane stepped forward on the screen. We are not here as conquerors or rulers. We are here as older siblings ready to share responsibilities that we have carried alone for too long. But make no mistake, the protection we have provided is not optional. The galaxy will be defended with or without your cooperation. And if we refuse? Chancellor Zelen asked, though he already knew the answer. Kane's smile was gentle but terrifying. Chancellor, in 2 centuries of protecting this galaxy, has any species ever successfully refused our guidance when their survival was at stake? The question needed no answer. Every being in the hall understood the reality of their situation. They were not the masters of the galaxy. They never had been. They were children who had been allowed to play at being adults, while their guardians watched from the shadows. Ambassador Kane's final words carried the weight of absolute authority. The formal integration of human and galactic civilizations will begin immediately. We have prepared transition protocols that will minimize disruption to your societies. Representatives from each government will be assigned human advisors to help navigate the new political reality. 6 months after the revelation, Veltar Makonis stood in his new office overlooking the harbor of New Geneva on Earth. The view was beautiful, blue water stretching to the horizon, with strange earth birds called seagulls floating on the wind. But Veltar barely noticed the scenery. He was too busy trying to understand the new maps spread across his desk. The Human Integration Office had given him a job that should have been familiar, creating updated galactic charts. But these maps showed a galaxy that was completely different from the one he had spent 40 years mapping. Human installations appeared everywhere, connected by transportation networks that used technology beyond galactic understanding. Worlds that had been marked as uninhabited for centuries showed thriving human colonies. Good morning, Veltar. How are the charts coming along? Director Susan Walsh entered the office carrying 2 cups of coffee, a human beverage that Veltar had grown to enjoy. Walsh was a middle-aged human woman with graying hair and kind eyes, but Veltar had learned not to underestimate her. She spoke 12 galactic languages fluently, and seemed to know more about alien politics than most alien politicians. The scope is overwhelming, Veltar admitted, gesturing at the holographic displays floating around his workspace. I thought I knew the galaxy, but this shows me I knew almost nothing. How long have humans been building all of this? About 150 years, Walsh replied, settling into a chair. We started expanding more aggressively once we were certain that the other species were stable enough to be left mostly alone. The early years after first contact were spent just observing and learning. Veltar highlighted a section of the map, showing the hegemony territories. These installations in hegemony space, they've been there for decades? Longer than that. We needed monitoring stations to keep track of their military developments. The hegemony has always been the most aggressive species in the galaxy. We had to make sure they didn't develop weapons that could threaten other civilizations. And they never detected you? Walsh smiled. Veltar, our stealth technology is about 300 years ahead of the best galactic sensors. We could park a battleship in orbit around any world in the galaxy, and their most advanced detection systems wouldn't notice it. The casual way, she said, it made Veltar's head spin. 300 years ahead. Not 3 years or 30 years, but 3 centuries of technological advancement. It was like comparing a stone knife to a plasma rifle. Director Walsh, can I ask you something that's been bothering me? Of course. If humans are so advanced, why did you wait so long to reveal yourselves? Why hide for 2 centuries? Walsh set down her coffee cup and was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Veltar, what happens when a highly advanced civilization contacts a primitive one? Usually the primitive civilization is absorbed or destroyed. Exactly. But we didn't want to destroy or absorb anyone. We wanted to see what would happen if species were allowed to develop naturally, without interference. It was a unique opportunity to study social evolution on a galactic scale. Veltar felt a chill. You were studying us. All of us. We were studying you, Walsh confirmed. Not in a cruel way, but with genuine scientific interest. How do different species handle technological development? How do they resolve conflicts? How do they balance individual needs with social cooperation? We learned fascinating things about intelligence and civilization that we never could have discovered any other way. And now the experiment is over? Now we need your help with bigger problems. The Devourer threat is real, Veltar. The next probe fleet will arrive within 5 years, and it will be larger than anything we've faced before. We can still handle it, but not without using weapons that will be visible throughout the galaxy. Better to end the secrecy on our terms than to have it exposed by emergency warfare. A chime from Veltar's communication system interrupted their conversation. Mr. Mekonis, this is Captain Ryan Brooks of the HSS Defender. We have a situation that requires your mapping expertise. Walsh activated the holographic display. Captain Brooks appeared as a three-dimensional image, wearing the dark blue uniform of the human space navy. Behind him, Veltar could see the bridge of a human warship. All smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to glow with their own light. Captain Brooks, what can we do for you? Walsh asked. We've intercepted a hegemony battle group attempting to test our defenses in the Kepler system. 3 battleships and 12 cruisers moving in attack formation toward the border. They appear to be under orders to provoke a response. Veltar felt his blood grow cold. The Kepler system was where the original confrontation between humans and the hegemony had taken place 2 centuries ago. If the hegemony was testing human defenses there, it meant they were still hoping to find some weakness they could exploit. How do you want to handle it, Captain? Walsh asked. With your permission, I'd like to provide them with an educational demonstration. Nothing harmful, but something that will discourage future tests. Approved. Try to be gentle. The display changed to show a tactical view of the Kepler system. Veltar could see the hegemony ships approaching the invisible boundary of human space, their weapons powered and shields raised. They were clearly expecting a fight. Then the human ship appeared on the display. It was much smaller than the hegemony battleships, sleek and graceful where they were massive and angular. But when it moved, it didn't behave like any ship Veltar had ever seen. It seemed to flow through space, changing direction without turning, accelerating without visible engine burns. HSS Defender to Hegemony Fleet. Captain Brooks' voice was calm and professional. You are approaching human territory with weapons active. Please power down your weapons and return to hegemony space. The response from the hegemony commander was predictably hostile. Human vessel, you are outnumbered 15 to 1. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. I understand your position, Commander. However, I must insist that you reconsider. What happened next was over so quickly that Veltar almost missed it. The hegemony ships simply stopped working. Their engines went silent. Their weapons powered. Down, their shields collapsed. They drifted through space like dead metal, completely helpless. Don't be alarmed, Commander, Brooks said gently. Your ships are undamaged. We've simply temporarily disrupted your power systems. Normal function will return in approximately 1 hour, giving you time to reconsider your approach. The hegemony. Commander's voice was shaken. What did you do to us? We used a localized field effect to interrupt the quantum coherence of your power cores. It's completely harmless, but it does make your ships temporarily inoperative. Think of it as a galactic timeout. Captain Brooks turned his attention back to Walsh and Veltar. The hegemony has been sending probe fleets to various points along our border for the past 3 months. Always the same pattern, just enough ships to test our responses, never enough to constitute a real threat. What are they hoping to accomplish? Veltar asked. They're still looking for some sign of weakness, some indication that our technology has limits they can understand. It's actually quite touching in a way. They can't accept that we're simply that far ahead of them. Walsh shook her head. The hegemony has always had trouble adapting to situations they can't control through force. How are the other species handling the integration? Much better. The consortium has embraced our technology sharing programs. The Zentorians are asking for help with their terraforming projects. Even the Trade Federation is cooperating, though they're still trying to figure out how to make a profit from advanced human technology. The tactical display showed the hegemony ships beginning to recover power. As soon as their engines came online, they turned around and headed back toward their own territory at maximum speed. "Captain Brooks," Walsh said, "please have your ship. Escort them to the border, then file a report. I want to track these probe attempts to see if there's a pattern." "Yes, ma'am." After the communication ended, Veltar sat in silence for a moment. He had just watched a single human ship disable an entire hegemony battle fleet without firing a shot. The technology required to do that was beyond his ability to understand. "Director Walsh, what happens to species like the hegemony that can't adapt to the new reality?" "The same thing that happens to anyone who refuses to accept help when they need it," Walsh replied sadly. "They struggle unnecessarily until they finally realize that cooperation is better than resistance. And if they never realize it, then they remain limited while everyone else grows and advances. We won't force anyone to accept our guidance, Veltar, but we also won't allow anyone to threaten the species that are working with us." Veltar looked back at his maps, now seeing them with new understanding. The galaxy had always been under human protection, but now that protection was open and official. Species that accepted human guidance were advancing rapidly, gaining access to technologies and knowledge that would have taken them centuries to develop alone. But some species, like the hegemony, were still trying to find ways to resist or exploit the new order. They were like children refusing help with their homework, insisting they could solve problems that were far beyond their current abilities.